This is Syd
And Elijah, Lajj for short,
of Run That Back.
with an analysis of film, music, and all other forms of media from an enthusiast point of view. We hope you enjoy.
We hope you enjoy.
So this week on Run That Back, we are going to be discussing the Netflix film, The Remix, Hip Hop and Fashion. The Remix is a film directed by Lisa Cortez and Farah Khalid about the contributions of fashion from a hip-hop lens. The documentary was released last year on Netflix and is a tremendous look into the world of hip-hop and the fashion influence it's had on pop culture, art, and other fashion trends.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about this film?
Elijah actually put me onto this. So he told me you should check this out because I love fashion. So I was not aware that this was a documentary that was on Netflix. So I just, love fashion documentaries of all kinds. So I was really excited to get into this. I thought this documentary was very insightful, and it further verified how influential Black people are. And I like seeing the origin stories of so many different things. Like they touch on how hip hop culture was placed into like the R&B groups and how that changed the styling and how they presented themselves and everything. And so the value in that. So I just really appreciated the history that was behind it, as well as the truth. Like they came with the receipts. Okay. We had the receipts. We had people speaking their truth and being very honest. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree. I think often, people sleep on the contributions that hip hop as a cultural phenomenon, not just the music itself, has influenced so much of greater mainstream pop culture. And there's a lot of cultural smudging, if you will, of the contributions, and they often get swept under the rug or just, lost in time. And so I appreciated this because I think it really highlighted some of the influences that it's had over time, and like you said, giving those origin stories and highlighting the designers who were really influential. The documentary highlights, designers like, is it Misa Hilton?
Misa, yeah,
Hilton,
like Lisa.
Dapper Dan, April Walker as well. And then there was a lane designer, and I'm blanking on her name, but they also mentioned her, and she talks about her experiences as well. And I just think that was super interesting and intriguing to be able to see their contributions to the overall culture of hip hop and fashion.
Yes. So let's start at the beginning. The opening scene was a quote from Coretta Scott King, and it said, "Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation." So what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great line, especially to open up the documentary. I think it's a line that really transcends time, because often we see how, the contributions of the past, they push us forward and they put us in a place where we are today to make changes and, put us in rooms and in different spaces that we weren't necessarily invited to in the past. But then at the same time, we fast forward to where we are present day, and we think about how much progress we made, and often sometimes upon reflecting we realize, well, maybe we really haven't made that much progress at all. Maybe we haven't made that much progress at all. And it's kind of bleak sometimes to think of things like that, but when you really do sit and reflect on stuff, sometimes it can be very disappointing.
This sobered me up so quick. I said, oh, the truth in it. You know what I mean? It was so heavy and so unfortunate, especially when you think of it from the lens of fashion. Like, they created all these huge names for themselves, this whole look and everything. And then it's like you take so many steps backwards when it's bitten off of you and everything. And then it's like, now you have the new generation and more designers and curators and creators trying to create that same lane, but it's like another uphill battle in another sense, because now that we do have fast fashion, it's like trying to get those unique individual voices heard, and copyright infringement, stealing from small businesses and everything. It's just a whole different fight, but it's the same because we're all looking for that freedom.
Yeah. So to continue on after that amazing line that was, opened up the documentary, it follows up with like a montage of all these style icons within the R&B and hip hop genre. You know, they show pictures of Missy Elliott, Beyonce, Solange. Shout out my girl Azealia Banks.
Janelle Monáe.
Yes, Janelle Monáe.
Yes.
And they really highlighted the Black female artists, but even as we watched the documentary, they start to touch on, you know, male influences as well. And obviously hip hop being a male dominated space, it would be, you know, wild to not mention them in a documentary about hip hop. And even though it's fashion, they also have their contributions to fashion in the hip hop industry.
Yeah. And like speaking, as you said, how now the current day montages of who they were showing were of women. When they brought it back, it was so much of the men in hip hop. And so they began to speak to how their women came to become in hip hop. And they talked about Roxanne, which there's actually a movie about her on Netflix, which I have not gotten around to.
Yeah, I've seen it. I think I saw it twice, and I like it. It's a good one.
Yeah, I've heard it's amazing. I just never got to it. So I definitely will be checking that out, especially because it was like highlighted in this documentary. So it makes me want to go back and learn more about that as well.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. I love how they touched upon that women in hip hop had to hide their femininity because if you were in hip hop, it was like, what are you doing here? And if you're going to come here, you need to bring that energy. You need to bring the same thing that the men are bringing, because we're not going to listen any other way. We don't want to see you being cute on the stage. You're supposed to have that, you know, the roughness about you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that speaks to like the assimilation of moving into spaces that don't necessarily start out with you in mind. And we see that across the board, not just in hip hop, but even if you're like in a corporate space, right? You're Black and you're in a corporate space, that's a space that you know, technically were not supposed to be there. Like you're not. So when you get into those spaces, you have to either make a conscious choice to assimilate to the ways of that space, or, you know, disrupt that space, or, you know, find a happy balance where you can, you know, assimilate here, but then in time, bring new things and new ideas to the table because you are in that room. And it's like a responsibility that really, when you are entering into a space that doesn't necessarily have much diversity, that you are bringing that to the table so that things aren't so homogenized all the time. But I think it was definitely interesting that, was it April or was it Misa that spoke about how when she started her line, she didn't want to, it was April, she didn't want to, when she started walker wear, which when she said that, I was like, oh, Rockaware. And then I was like, oh no, it's a walker wear.
Yes.
Which I had also heard of, but I was thinking Rockaware, but I was like, Rockaware, isn't that Jay-Z?
Right. I'm so weak.
It threw me off, but then I was like, oh, walkerware. But yeah, she spoke about how when she was first coming up and she had opened up her store in the Bronx, or in Brooklyn, excuse me, that she didn't want to be, you know, the face of things, because she didn't think from a business standpoint that would be smart. Like
she was hiding that she was a woman. Which very similar to when later on Pyre Moss says that he was hiding that he was Black. But that's something we need to sit and discuss. But sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, I think it's interesting when we see that playing out and people not necessarily, I don't want to say not having the confidence, but understanding the space that they're in and how to navigate it when they aren't necessarily a part of it yet, or they weren't thought to be a part of that community.
I think it's just protecting themselves too, because they know how it would look to be like a woman and like, oh, I'm about to start this brand, I'm about to start this line, and then people might, you know, potentially laugh at you or you know, write you off or anything. But if you just come with the heat first, you know, you come with, you know, what they're looking for first, and then you can later reveal like, oh, it's me, and then they're just like, oh, I know, but cool. You know what I mean? And that's what essentially she said, that's how they reacted. They was like, oh, this is April.
Yeah, it's definitely that I've got to prove my worth first before I'm taken seriously. And so she said, well, I'm going to do that. And the whole
Right.
time you're not going to know that it's me behind,
Mm-hmm.
the work that you've been, or the art and the fashion that you've been wearing all this time. Like, it's been me this whole
Yeah.
time. And now you know that I can bring something to the table, rather than people, seeing you first and making that judgment and saying, oh, this woman, she don't know what she's doing. Like, I don't want to wear that feminine shit. Like, no, but
Yes.
she can tap into that. And when you really immerse yourself in any kind of art form,
Mm-hmm.
no matter who you are, you can, well, I don't always agree with that, but in
Yeah.
this case, she definitely did she did the research, she did the homework. And even
Mm-hmm.
with that, it's, that's a masculine and a feminine thing when it comes to fashion, and knowing how to work fashion for males and females from a masculine and a feminine point of view. But with fashion, I think those lines can be blurred, and you're able to create art that can transcend both genders.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, so from there, they started to introduce us to Dapper Dan.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was April who quoted and said, hip hop fashion has a love affair with luxury because it means
Mm-hmm.
you made it. And she was talking about logos and the
Yeah.
presence of logos like Fendi, Gucci, Louis Vuitton,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you could see those brands and monograms so clearly, knowing that you were able to wear that means that you made it, of course,
Mm-hmm.
for Black people that didn't come by that easily.
Yeah.
So Dapper Dan began to talk about how he was like, he was around a group of people when they saw a hustler was showing off a little Louis Vuitton pouch that he had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he was in Harlem, and a lot of people didn't know much about like high fashion brands and houses yet. And he saw how enamored people were, and he was like, I'm about to flip this. Like,
Yes.
I really admired his
Mm-hmm.
hustle because he
Yeah.
just thought so much about that sense of belonging that people look for,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as that and being set apart at the same time. Like, I
Yeah.
got the Fendi, what you rocking? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? That type of
Mm-hmm.
energy. So he began to learn about printing fabrics and everything, and was just using the prints of these brands, but it wasn't a fabric, but
Yeah.
he, he
Listen, I
was,
was watching like,
right.
when is this gonna take a turn?
Right, and I was like, never knew that Dapper Dan was like ripping stuff off like that. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know he was doing bootleg, but it was
Mm-hmm.
looking exclusive and people was
Yeah, for
rocking it.
sure.
So I thought that was interesting, but because it was for us, and because
Mm-hmm.
artists weren't really getting those high fashion brands looking
Mm-hmm.
at them anyway, he was like, I'm gonna
Right.
do this, I'm gonna flip
Right.
this. And like the fact that he even had a store, a 24-hour store,
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Which
he really is a
was
hustler.
about that hustle.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I like what you said about, the fact that a lot of times not even a lot of times, in the beginning of hip hop, the hip hop genre, these high fashion brands, they weren't looking for,
Mhm.
these people to be rocking their high fashion garb, their high fashion
Mhm.
fashion. Like, hey, I don't want that shit on my.
And still don't be doing it.
Yeah, okay. I think probably the most prominent people that, when you think of high fashion, but it's not even high fashion, athletic wear is like Run DMC with their
Oh,
collaboration with
Adidas.
Adidas. But
Mhm.
that's sportswear, that's athletic wear. That's not, Fendi, Prada, Gucci.
Mhm.
That's not like
Chanel.
that's not
Right.
like a high fashion brand. And so it was very evident that in the beginning of hip hop, that the brands, they just weren't looking for that image, like that it didn't fit
Yeah.
the brand at the
Yep.
time. But little did they know, there was money to
Yeah.
be made.
Yeah. And he
And
had the money.
yeah, absolutely, there was money to definitely be made, and using these hip hop artists to promote their lines and their brands.
Yeah, and because there was money to be made, they made the point that in the mid 90s, music videos, they had like some of the largest budgets in history around that time. I remember they highlighted Scream with Michael Jackson and
Mm-hmm.
Janet Jackson
Mm-hmm.
was a $7 million video, which makes
Mm-hmm.
sense because it's very futuristic
Yeah,
for
it
when
is,
it
for
was. So
sure.
it makes sense. But
I think
they
it's
talked
one of the most expensive music videos ever made. Did you say that?
really.
Yeah, I think
I
it's
did,
one of the
yeah.
most expensive music. It's like that, and then like one of Mariah Carey's music videos, which when you watch it, you're like, why was this so expensive? I want to say it was Honey. but I might be
Oh
wrong.
my God, I have to look that up later.
It's
It's probably
it's
because
one of
everything
Mariah
was
Carey's
dripping in
videos.
diamonds.
Yeah.
But
It wasn't though. It was like her. I cannot think for the life of me what music video it was, but it's like her fighting herself in a movie theater. Like they get in I don't know. She's like on a date and she runs
uh-uh.
into her alter ego or her doppelganger, I should say, and they like get in a fight in the bathroom. I cannot think of what song it is. It's making me mad.
I don't know what
But
that is.
yeah, it was one. It popped up on one of the most expensive videos of all time, and I was like, "Oh, interesting.
Oh,
Didn't know
I just remembered I saw TLC Waterfalls
that."
and I saw Scream. So maybe that was just the one I didn't recognize, the Mariah Carey one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really had some power behind this, and you can
Mm-hmm.
spend that much money because you know people are going to watch the videos and
Mm-hmm.
that you're a big name, you know what I
Yep.
mean? So we definitely had such a huge influence in the music industry for sure. And one of my favorite quotes, it was Misa.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "A true stylist is an image architect." And I said,
Yeah.
"Let me write that down. Hold
Uh-huh.
on."
For
That's
sure.
just it's just so true, especially when we're talking about music videos. You remember those looks, like they're
Mm-hmm.
ingrained in our brains, especially how our brains are really wired to remember imagery. So,
Yes.
you know, when you do that correctly, it's
Mm-hmm.
forever in your brain. And like she
Mm-hmm.
talks about how she created the looks. She was behind the ideas for Crush on You, Little Kim,
Yeah. Oh,
with the
yes.
different color wigs and everything. And people back then was like, why are you gonna have a colored wig? This look tacky.
Yeah.
This
Never
we're
gonna
not doing
work.
this. It's a no. And
Mm-hmm.
she pushed through and she was like, I think this is really gonna work. And like how many people, and that's what I love. She was like, look who's doing it now. And then
Yeah.
came all the
Yeah.
pictures
Mm-hmm.
of people that have been doing it still to this very day. And I love that because it
And
came from the
even
back.
replicating the image for like Halloween costumes. You know, you had like Beyonce a couple years ago when
Yeah. Oh, she
she
did do
she
it.
dressed
Yeah.
up, yeah, and then you have
Mm-hmm.
other influencers that are
Yeah.
not a part of the culture trying to appropriate, but we won't go there. Um,
Right. Or we can, because they touched on that too.
they
But
do.
yeah, so I really appreciate it how they really honored stylists, because I think in the world of fashion, a lot of times people underestimate the power of styling, and
Hmm.
it's very much important. I mean, I'm not gonna rant, but I kind of want to about just how like you can just people don't understand its significance, but then when you see somebody on TV looking dusty, what's the first thing
Hmm.
you say? Why they
Hmm.
look dusty on
Why they
TV
look
like
like
that?
that? Yeah.
Yeah, on TV. And you know, a stylist is a person that's gonna have your look together, your whole
Hmm.
persona
Hmm.
intact. And they did that so well when they talked about Jagged Edge
Hmm.
with Mary J. Blige. I love seeing
Yes.
her in this.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
You know, and the Little Kim, those big names, and Misa was behind all of that.
Yeah.
We didn't introduce her, but Misa was somebody that met Diddy, and then
Hmm.
they ended up dating. And then because of who Diddy was, she got, you know, introduced to everything, was working with everybody. People
Right.
trusted her, people loved her, and she was working with Biggie. I mean, she was like at the height, the top of the top. She was doing it all. And so
Hmm.
I really respected her and everything that she brought.
Yeah, I loved when they she talked about how when she would listen to hip hop and the music that was out at the time, she would go in the room and she would just close her eyes and just listen to the song and envision styling people. And as someone who
Mm,
is a creative myself, when I listen to music, I often like I'll close my eyes and I'll envision how I would make a music video to that. And I just related to that so much
yes.
about like
Mm-hmm.
just being able to come up with that kind of stuff and envision it in your head.
Yeah.
It's a rush for me, and so I can only
Yeah,
imagine for
and
her it was the same.
yeah, and I think as well it instilled a sense of confidence in myself, because the fact that people were like, "Girl, don't do them wig colors," and then she was like, "No, I'm gonna do it. I'm really gonna do it," and it just instilled a sense of confidence in myself, because it was like, how many times do you have an idea that you go back on, or you don't think is of worth, or you don't think is valuable? You're scared about how it's gonna be received, and then you never do it. But it could be that iconic thing, you know. It could be something that people needed to see. So I just love that, the story behind that, because I'm like, I know that happens all the time where somebody else shuts down your ideas or tries to
Hmm.
suppress your means of creativity, but then it ends up being this beautiful, grand thing.
Absolutely. You had mentioned how she dated P Diddy, which kind of segues into how he influenced not only hip hop, but how he tried to kind of transcend that same fashion and those looks and styles into R&B music, which was interesting to me because, initially, I think it was, God, who did they go see? It was a major producer that they went to go see to kind of introduce the idea of dressing these R&B singers who had traditionally always wore dressed up in their videos and were looking like, they were on their way to church in their Sunday's best, but they wanted to switch it up and, present them in this more
some
street,
jeans, some leather,
some jeans, or more streetwear. And the producer that they went to go see that I'm blanking on, embarrassing.
I'm terrible with producers, so I don't even know.
He shot them down. He was like, no, like they are singing R&B music. Like the people don't want to see them looking like rappers. They want to see them looking like, someone that you want to chase after, somebody who's got their shit together.
An upstanding class act.
Yeah, a classic man. But meantime, in between time, people want to see a hood too. Like
hello. They want to see what's happening now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just thought that was funny. There's just always going to be pushback when we start to introduce new ideas or new images that people just think that they're not ready for. But it's like, come on, you're not ready for it because you don't want to do it. Like we got to step out and do it. And now we'll know whether or not it's a good idea. And 9 times out of 10, it is. Y'all just afraid to take that leap.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. So we're going to take it back to Dapper Dan because we go back to his story. And at this point, his store was popping. Okay. He said he created the 24-hour store because he knew that the money was on the streets 24 hours. Okay. And late at night. And so he knew people were coming for the exclusive stuff that only Dapper Dan was creating. And unfortunately, his store ended up getting shut down because Mike Tyson, of all people, came in, started a fight. The police had to come. They saw where he was at, what Dapper Dan was doing. They said, sir,
we
where did you get this
down.
from? Where did you get this from?
Right.
So they shut him down for copyright infringement. And he spoke to how, he tried to keep the store up and everything. It kept getting shut down. So he ended up going underground and everything. But that kind of killed him. That killed, that exclusivity that he was creating for these artists, for people, just like regular people on the streets and everything.
Yeah, and how he talks about how he was traveling to see like all the major Black designers from the East Coast to the West
Chicago,
Coast, and
Atlanta,
the East Coast to the South, and how he had to, because he had to move underground, he had to find a market. He had to find customers, so he was traveling all over and meeting with these bigger designers in the South and the West Coast. Well, not really the West Coast, but Midwest. And then when he was coming back, the high fashion brands kind of started to take notice that, okay, well, maybe there is something here, maybe there is something to this, maybe we should give this man a try.
And they use his downfall to segue into that appropriation thing that we spoke to, because they were very clear and plain about that in this documentary, which I appreciated because there's no secrets here. I love when there's no secrets in the room. Okay, so they were very, very clear and upfront about it, like y'all bit off of us. And so they talked about how white people were beginning to notice the power and influence of hip hop and its integration into fashion, and they began to take that from us. And so they were chasing all these trends and flipping the styles as quickly as possible. They were losing the unique qualities of brands like Carl Kanai and Walker Wear, where there was a distinct style. They had the logoing, they had the style that was very clear, but with them trying to outreach as many people, we want, this hip hop and fashion thing out at the forefront. We want everybody to have it. It started to lose its unique qualities.
Yeah, it becomes watered down.
Yeah, definitely. And the creativity of it was siphoned out. And April Walker specifically said that she ended up walking away.
Yeah.
So we had that. And then Napster came in, which was, online music, streaming, and everything.
Pre-LimeWire. Napster. When they said that, I was like, dang, that was before LimeWire. They threw it way back.
Yes, Napster was developed, I believe, in 2001. So yeah, it really hit the music industry, and then it really shifted in the way that they were creating music, outputting these artists, because I feel as though in the heyday of the music industry, which the 80s and 90s in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like Black influence and the huge names like
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson, TLC, all those bigger names that have whole movements and whole
Yeah.
styles behind them,
Mm-hmm.
because TLC had that whole tomboy
Yeah.
look that
Yeah.
was such a
Missy
big
Elliott
influence.
and her
Yeah,
styles.
yes, and Mary J. Blige too,
Mary J.
because she talked
Blige,
about
yes.
how she
Mm-hmm.
was so such a tomboy, and
Mm-hmm.
how she put that into her look and everything. So you had these more so figures and artists that were out front in the forefront, and they were able to have their own eras, their own movements, their
Right.
own style behind them. But then if you're going to shift to online music, and it's like, oh, we don't have a need for these big concerts or these
Yeah.
appearances, and anybody can really tap into this market, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not as distinctive. Everybody's starting to sound the same,
Mm-hmm.
and everything. So it really, it's a trickle down effect, because that's how it began to affect the fashion as well. This leads us into the modern day fashion scene, and we're introduced to Kirby Jean Raymond, who is the creative mind behind the brand Pyre Moss. So I actually knew who Pyre Moss was. I had seen some of his work a little bit, and when he really became ingrained in my mind was his show for the fall winter 2018 season. He did a show in Weeksville, which was one of America's first free Black communities.
Oh, wow.
And when I researched behind the show, I was speechless. I was like, it was just beautiful to me that he, tapped into the first free Black community. He had a show. It was, honoring us, Black lives, and it was just so beautiful. They had a choir that was just, vocalizing. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful, stunning show. So that's when he first became ingrained into my mind, and just how he chose to honor Weeksville as well as fashion. It was a great show. So I was so excited to see him in this documentary, because I consider him unapologetically Black. And what stopped me in my tracks is when he said, when he first was creating his line, he didn't want people to know he was Black. What
Mm-hmm.
did you think about that?
I unfortunately, it's upsetting when you hear stuff like that. But then you also take a
Yeah.
second and you're like, I mean, of course. I mean, again, it harkens back to that quote at the beginning of the documentary where, Coretta Scott King says that struggle is a never-ending process, and that every generation has their own battle to fight
Yeah.
in, some kind of struggle. And so when we hear Pyre Moss or excuse me, Kirby talking about how he didn't want people to know that he was Black because, of course, he probably didn't think that he would get the recognition, he wouldn't get the um, budgets and just the opportunity to really showcase the work that he was able to do simply because of what he looked like. And it just speaks to, the how intersectionality and your different identities can really be sometimes a hindrance, and how you never want to hide that, and you never want to not be true to who you are. But when you are working in certain spaces, you really have to be cognizant in order to navigate so that you're able to climb to a point where you can actually make a difference. And sometimes if people feel like you are taking up too much space, or that you're not the person that should be in the space to begin with, they're not going to give you that chance to shine. So I understand, wanting to take the route of not announcing or being, openly forward about him being Black. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with your point. It just hurt me so much, because
Mm-hmm.
like it's so interesting to see somebody before the release of Fear. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's so centered in fear, to be like, oh, I can't tell them I'm Black, or with the repercussions.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying his fear is unfounded, because we know what
absolutely.
happens
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you are Black in spaces. But it was so interesting, and I definitely had to refer back to that quote as well, because it's like, it's just a testament to like, that's a struggle that you go through. That's something
Mm-hmm.
that you have to fight for, and like deciding that you are going to be Black, that you
Mm-hmm.
are going to take up the space,
Mm-hmm.
that you are going to honor Black lives and Black people in your work.
Yeah.
So I let it go, but at first I was like, oh my God. But it was so interesting, because he did share with us his journey from first, like he purposely didn't show his face after shows, because after a runway show, typically designers come out, do a quick little wave, thank you, make their face known, and they leave. And so he said that he purposely would not walk out at the end of the shows. He did very, very few interviews, if any at all. So it was in 2015, when there was so much police brutality going on, that Kirby decided that he needed to speak out, and he wanted to integrate the happenings of, you know, Black Lives into his work and his shows. So he created a Black Lives Matter collection where it had things like leather jackets with, you know, Black Lives Matter scripted on it, and it was huge. It sold out, and it had great reception from what he did. Now, when it came to doing this show, he ended up creating a documentary that included the families of, you know, those lives that were lost, and, you know, speaking out about police brutality and being Black in America. And so he showed that documentary as well as the videos of these people being killed at the beginning of the show. And he had the models walk up with a blank canvas and clothing, meaning they were just wearing all white. And an artist came and wrote on them, like, "I can't breathe," on pants and everything. And the shoes they were wearing were white combat boots, and it had blood splatters and everything on it, as if they, you know, had walked through a massacre.
Yeah.
And it was not well received at all. You know, the
Yeah.
whites were tight. They did not like it.
Okay, fuming. This is not the
Yes, they were
time,
not,
place, and or
do not,
space.
yes. The
Yeah.
feathers were ruffled, okay? And so as a result of that, he ended up losing 4 of his brand deals, as well as, he said, a large
Wow.
amount of 6 figures. So I'm thinking 500,000 up.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say, like, oh, now I get it, because this shouldn't be what happens to Black people. But it's like, okay, this is the effects of being Black, being bold. It's speaking your truth. Things like this happen. Like, you know, he lost brand deals. Why? For being truthful? You know what I mean? So, you know, it really, really sucks. And he said that, you know, some people might have considered it career suicide. He himself thought it was career suicide. But then he ended up getting the collaboration with Reebok, which really put him up, and he said saved his brand, like, genuinely. And then in 2018, the CFDA does a designer, they have like a grant, a fund that you can win for like up and coming designers, and it gives them like $400,000 to keep them going in their brand. And he was one of the winners. So he ended up being able to still have his brand, to be Black, and, you know,
stay true to
keep
himself.
keep that integrity about him in the end. So it worked out for him. So it was just such an interesting journey. It really does still speak to the bastardization of Black people in fashion, whether it be directly from our culture, whether it be from stylists and designers trying to be within this industry, and etc., where it just kind of feels like, you know, we get a little bit, you know, we may be a little sprinkling on Vogue, but, you know,
but don't get too bold. Don't get too bold.
Yeah. That's all you get. That's right now.
Yeah.
You know, and you're good for the next 8 months. You
Right.
know? It just really highlights what still goes on now, and how there's
absolutely.
that lack of respect, that lack of trust as well, because it's crazy to think of all of the Black buying power that Black people have,
Absolutely.
as well as all the influence that Black creators have, and to still be like, yeah, that's the truth, but they don't. It's like they don't trust us, or they don't care about us enough for us to do that boldly, you know?
Yeah, it's always been interesting for me to see that kind of backlash in creative and artistic spaces when things become very politically and socially charged, and it comes out in the art. And, you know, fashion is an art expression. So to see people not receive that well, it kind of speaks to this idea of like even like respectability within art spaces, where people are like, well, yeah, that's that, you know, political social stuff, and this is something different. And it's like, no, the two definitely coexist.
Coincide.
And they need to, because, you know, art is supposed to be a reflection of the now. And if the now is, you know, even the ugly of now, not just always the positive and the happy and the stuff that, you know, we can always be gleeful about, but even the stuff that is, you know, hard to digest and that we don't necessarily want to talk about. You know, it's got to be, can't sweep it under the rug. So, you know, good for him for being bold enough to step out and do that. But go ahead.
And I agree, and it's paying off for him because, as I said, his most recent shows are beautiful. He did another show where they had a gospel choir, and it's just beautiful Blackness. I love it. So I think, as well as what you're saying, is like how art as well as fashion has to be the now, and both the reflection of what we're wearing now, it's the function of clothing, as well as, you know, what's happening socially and politically. It's very interesting that you say that, because I took a costume history class, and so we really learned about um, uh, the history of fashion, of course, and its connection with the time. So there was things like when there was the Great Depression, you know, obviously funds were not being used for fashion, for clothing, because that was something that was excess, that was something that wasn't needed. And so the lines and silhouettes of clothing got very simple, so that you were able to transfer those items for various years. You know, you didn't know what was coming next, so you're not going to do something very outlandish and bold, because it's like, okay, we need this to stretch.
Right.
So it's really interesting to me that that's the way in which our clothing and fashion functions. Yet we have now integrated fashion to be more of an artistic form. So it really speaks to how old-fashioned and outdated American fashion culture is, because it's like, yeah, you still want to quote unquote speak to what's going now, but you can't speak. Like, so right now I've seen some shows, they do have those, you know, cleaner silhouettes. Like Jacquemus has a very limited palette, and they're very simplistic in general, but you know, it's really to speak to the pandemic and the times that we're in currently. But yet when you pair that with you know, performance art or something like that, it's too much. And that reminds me of Alexander McQueen, where he was always borderline, like, this man is low-key doing too much, because he integrated a lot of performance art with his garments, as well as the shows that went on as well. And you know, that was misunderstood, but it's like, it, like you said, it goes with each other, you know. And the times of the Great Depression, we didn't really have, you know, New York Fashion Week. We didn't have these opulent shows to both pair the simplistic silhouettes with, you know, a show speaking to that directly. But now we do have that, so we need to use that time. We need to use those spaces and those platforms to both speak about how we represent the now and the clothing, as well as we can speak to it through art.
Yeah, well said.
You know, that's my thing. I'm like,
I enjoy hearing you talk about it for sure.
Yes. So back to the documentary. So they definitely highlight the appreciation versus appropriation when we talk to the current time, and they bring us back to Dapper Dan once again, because although he was ripping off the let me not say rip. That's I mean, he was, but it's a little mean. We like Dapper Dan. Okay,
he was remixing. He was remixing.
Yes. He was remixed. So Dapper Dan was remixing and utilizing the monograms and logos of these big fashion houses. Back in the day, though, that was shut down quick. You know, there was Gucci that stole a very well-known jacket that he created. He used a Louis Vuitton monogram, actually, but it was like a jacket. It had these huge puffy sleeves, and then come to find out, Gucci created the same thing. And you know, with the days of the internet, and they mentioned Black Twitter, which I love that Black Twitter actually has it has so much power.
Its moment in history. Listen, Black Twitter is powerful. It powerful.
Black Twitter is a thing. It's real.
That's why I will always stand Black Twitter, because we shut it down, call it out, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out. Somebody knows.
It actually creates change, but because Black Twitter called them out and said, you stole that. That Gucci felt cornered and was like, all right, I mean, I guess we can bring Dapper Dan in, which is kind of a conflicting thing to me as well. Because it's like, where's the line? Like, although Dapper Dan himself didn't start off using, like, he wasn't honestly using their brands, it was still his creations, and very much so his creations, in the way that there's archives of it, there's pictures, there's proof, you know, that was him. So my thing is always the line, like, okay, when do you, and I know this is a little dramatic, but you know, it's in terms that we can relate to right now. So when do you, like, take the hand of your oppressor and just
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, like, this is fine now? Or do you stand your ground and say, that's still not enough for me, or you're
Right.
wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's always that line, like,
Absolutely.
oh, things are so tricky.
Yeah. And you know what? It's great that you mentioned that, because even when I was watching it, I was like, dang, I don't even know if, like, after that I would even want to work with those people. I would just be like, you know
Yes.
what? Thanks. I appreciate you recognizing me and,
Mm-hmm.
finally giving me my credit. But at this point, like, I don't want your bag, because it's disingenuous. But you know what?
Yeah,
That's
because
not.
like, if you stole something, you stole it because it wasn't
Mhm.
yours.
Mhm.
So even if they, for some reason, they didn't know it was Dapper Dan's, they knew it wasn't their creation. Let's
Yeah,
start
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because this is another surprise. I know about Dapper Dan and Gucci, but I didn't know how it came from this. And I'm
Mhm.
like, because I'm not the biggest Gucci fan, so
Yeah.
I didn't know that this Dapper Dan and Gucci collaboration came because they stole it, and they're like, okay, you guys called us out here,
Right.
Dapper Dan.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, but
Mhm.
okay, they showed Dapper Dan. He had the glasses, he had the fit.
Yeah.
He's definitely using the money.
He's
Okay,
definitely
he
dapper.
used it. Yes, hello. He used this business
Mhm.
opportunity properly. I can't be mad at him,
Yeah,
but
no, not
it's
at
really
all.
interesting how it came to be.
And it's interesting because we say that they stole from him, and even though he technically, stole from Louis V, it's
Mm-hmm.
the power dynamics of it they're different, because he stole
Yeah,
because he wasn't given the space to create at
definitely.
such a high level, and so he took
Mm-hmm.
that and did his own thing because there was no
And
space for
let's be
him to
real, they
create.
wouldn't have sold the material to him, because now you
Yeah,
can actually
yeah.
buy like monogrammed
Oh,
logos and make
okay,
your own
okay.
things. Yeah, you can do that now. They wouldn't have done that for him.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
definitely agree. There's the
Hmm.
power dynamics, which is why, I brought up oppression, because it's very
Hmm.
much so what happens with marginalized groups.
Yeah.
So kind of rounding this out, it just kind of made you sit there, not in like a cliffhanger, dismal type of way, but it just definitely created food for thought that made me have to run that
Hmm.
back. I'm gonna watch this
Yeah,
again. I
for
definitely am.
sure,
And
for sure.
I just like an ending quote, and I cannot remember who said it. I apologize, but she
Hmm.
said, there are definitely more Black models today in fashion, but
Hmm.
are we profiting off of the consumption and the creation?
Yeah, I think that's a really good quote, because oftentimes, again, we see the influence, we see the impact, but only through the art itself, but not necessarily the monetary, the economic
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. We aren't sitting in we
Mm-hmm.
aren't benefiting in that way, which is, it's
Yeah.
not cool for sure.
So yeah, I would just definitely say, just like off that quote, it makes you think. This really does speak to what we're looking to now, the liberation,
Mm-hmm.
Black liberation, and the fights that we have, because it's like, okay, sure, Adut is like one of the largest models. Adut to catch is one of the largest models in the world right now. She's a Black model, a dark skinned, very, very beautiful girl. Love her.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the largest models at the moment. And it's like, all right, cool. You always have your token Black women
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of times, and that's cool. But it's like, systematically, are you changing things? And that's what all
Mm-hmm.
of liberation, Black liberation, this fight is for. Because it's like, okay, you have these, like, these designers, but they're one out of 500. Or,
Right.
we have your one model that can actually model, and then you have
Mm-hmm.
your white model, Kendall Jenner. I'm gonna say her name. I ain't scared of nobody. Is in this space, and she don't do nothing. This girl
Yeah,
cannot emote.
yeah.
She can't move her body, but she's the highest paid model in the world right
Oh,
now. And it's just like,
wow. I did not know
girl, when I seen that article, I said, But
Wow.
yeah, she's like one of the highest paid models in the world, which is just absurd. So I'm saying that not only to drag her freely, because I love to do that, but because
Tell us how you
it's
really
like,
feel.
oh no, I just, oh my God, don't have me rant on that either.
I won't.
Anyway.
Moving on.
But I say that though, because systematically, are you giving Black people a fair chance? Are
Hmm.
you changing the structure? Are you
Hmm.
opening these doors to Black stylists? Are you allowing them to go to the showrooms like everybody else is going to these showrooms
Yeah.
and picking for their clients? Like, it's like, cool, this is happening, but like, systematically, it's all the same. Like, it's
Hmm.
really a lucky shot if you're
Hmm.
getting out there and you've actually made a name for yourself.
Yeah.
But you're not getting those equal opportunities. You're not getting that access and those advantages and that education like all these other white counterparts are getting that are actually stealing from us. And it's like, how do we replenish our well?
Yeah.
And, you know, how do we progress and do what we need to do when we don't get what the resources that we need? But it's like, we still come out on top. We still make what we need to make, and we're still having that influence. It's just the nature of who we are, but it's still so unfair. And it's like, in the end, does it end up moving you? And I think that's why she said that. Like, it's like, cool, we, you know, we got a little sprinkling, we got a little wave and whatnot, but it's like, are we actually getting a profit after all that we have done for this culture?
Is the progress really being made? And you know, April Walker, she talked about how when she decided to kind of come back into the fashion world via the digital age, she saw an opportunity for her to go straight to consumer and not have to go through, you know, avenues in which there were white gatekeepers. She was able to go straight to her consumer. Therefore, she was able to profit 100%. Well, I won't say 100%, but she was able to, I don't know if that's true or not, but she was able to profit directly and not have to prove her worth, because now she had that access to give her product straight to who it is that she wanted to work with, or who was interested in her, and them not having to go through a middleman. And so I think that's one of the pluses about the digital age, is that people have a little bit more space to do what they want, free of anyone telling them, well, you can do this, you can do that, be careful with this, be careful of that. So I think that that's, you know, on a positive note, you know, the digital era, the age of the internet is really, you know, Black people's best friends, and we just have to learn how to utilize that to our advantage, for sure. So this has been another episode of Run That Back, where we looked at the remix of Hip Hop in Fashion on Netflix. And I would say that I would run this back because it really just highlighted some of the importance of hip hop culture in the fashion industry. And it was just a detailed insight on that. And I just really appreciate being able to learn things that might otherwise go unknown on, you know, Netflix platform. So it's accessible, like it's there. Everyone has Netflix. You can sit down, watch it, and you can consume something that you didn't know existed, or, you know, influence so much of what you're consuming in the pop culture space today.
Yeah, and definitely it tells you too that us as Black people, you know, to continuously honor those people that came before us, because the power that was behind them, and then, you know, how they broke ground into this industry is just so amazing and admirable.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up this episode. You all have a good one.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Intro and outro music for the Run That Back podcast is provided by artist London, LNDN. Find them streaming on Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, and YouTube, or any other streaming service under the name Emo Prince.